this video, I'm going to give you some examples and work with some ideas for how to use photographs in Illustrator, along with some clipping masks and other elements. We're going to go ahead and create a new Illustrator document, and we're going to make it tabloid size 11 by 17 inches. You can choose to do this vertically or horizontally for this poster design. I want you to be aware that I want you to add in a 1/4 inch bleed top, bottom, left, right. This is the first time you've done that, and what that will do is it will make an 11 by 17 inch document and then add on another 1/2 inch to the entire document, making it larger and a little bit bigger. So when we print it, there'll be more stuff that we can trim off. Make sure it's an RGB color and it's at 300 pixels per inch, which is print quality. If these are correct, go ahead and hit create, and you're going to see that your artboard goes right to 11 by 17, but you'll get this little bit of red that goes over that, and that is your bleed, and that will actually print out on the printer, and then they will cut it inside of that. So make sure that all your colors or whatever go to the outside. So usually when you're working with a poster, you're going to have a thumbnail for a layout or those kinds of things. You might actually even want to start with something like a basic color for the entire poster. So again, you can do this just by selecting the rectangle tool, filling it in, removing the border, the stroke here, and then choosing a color that you find is interesting. You might even come up with a swatch palette for this poster so that everybody in the group can be working with the same swatch set. So if you've downloaded it or worked with it, that also might be possible. When you're working with color, you can also use this background color. You can always select it, and in your properties panel you can even change the opacity. Now whatever's underneath that color will be the thing that the opacity is actually blending with. So we had white initially, so more transparent I make this rectangle, the obviously lighter it will get. If there was a black underneath, it would be just the opposite. Okay, once that's there, you might want to go to your layers palette or your layers window and just start thinking about how you're going to be either locking these things because you don't want to have to mess with this once it's there. Labeling everything carefully, ground, will be kind of important for this project because you're going to have a lot of objects and they will be in front and behind and those kinds of things, and we don't want those to be lost. Okay, some items that I'm going to show you. First off, let's just get a letter here. Let's make it the letter S. Make it, let's say 400 points, and we'll make it Times New Roman, just so we have some serifs to look at. And here's a letter that we're going to be working with, just so you can see how this works. I'm going to just duplicate it so I have multiple copies. You'll be working with your text. Again, think about font pairing and those kinds of things when you're developing your initial style with your group. I'm going to go ahead and object expand, just like we've done in the past, this letter S. And some things that you can think about doing. You can see that this S now is an outline, right? Some of the things that you might want to do with this letter S is to maybe break it apart into interesting pieces. Maybe you have a large block of text and you want to separate it out and make it look like it's been cut up. Easy way to do that is to use the line tool here and just make some line segments across the letter, maybe something like this, somewhat random. And then when you select all those, so you'll just go ahead and select them. Don't select the outside bounding box, which we have selected. Let's see. I don't know where that is coming from. There we go. So we've just selected those lines that we've just made and the letter S. And notice those lines don't have any stroke on them, and the S is a solid color. Going to your Pathfinder window, if you open it up here, or if you go to the window itself, you'll see this divide tool. We've used this in the past, and if you click on that, what you're going to do is use those line segments to cut up the letter. Currently it's grouped, so I'm just going to ungroup so I can show you what you've actually done, and you can kind of see now that these letters these objects are now separate, complete separate objects. So you can actually play with this and modify these to your heart's content. So you can make some really interesting elements, cut up shapes, use that to kind of like overall design things. I want you to be aware that when you do that, you might produce some additional shapes. So just hit the command Y to make sure that that the additional shapes aren't there. As you can see, everything looks like a solid shape for me. So command Y again. Another possibility for a letter, let's go ahead and select this and go to Object Expand. By the way, this is only going to work for black letters, so that's why the black is selected. So I'm going to bring in place a photograph into my window. So let's see, I have a photograph, this photograph here of texture bark. I'm going to hit place, and I'm just going to place it, and you can kind of see if I zoom out that that's really large. So I'm just going to make it smaller. So now it's about the size of the letter S. I'm going to arrange this, put it to the back. It's important when you do this technique. What I'm going to be using is this texture to replace this black in the S. And so the texture itself always needs to be behind the shape that you're actually using to like fill in. So I'm going to take this and arrange it to the back. And obviously it sent it way to the back, right underneath our locked layer. So let's move it one step forward, and now we can see it. Or you can just bring it to the forward. Or you could have taken the letter S and bring that to the front. Either way would have allowed this and this to actually be in the right order. So what I'm doing is holding the Shift key, selecting the background, selecting the letter S, and what we're going to do is make a clipping mask. We could do it here, but there's another place to do it. And if you click on the opacity word, you'll open up the transparency palette, and you'll notice that there's a make mask right there. And so if you do that, you'll see right away that you've actually used the shape itself as a masking element, right? So that's one way of working with this this mask, is you could do that, or you could do it across multiple things. So if I had wanted to, I can release that mask, and if I had wanted to make both of these shapes have the same textured element, I could have selected all the things. In this case, this is at the back, and then gone to the opacity palette, and then click make mask, and obviously that did not work. I'm going to release that. There's something, maybe it's because of this overlap here. There we go. Usually this works just fine. I'm going to go ahead and expand this as well. Because we deconstructed this, we'd have to double check to see what's going on. I'm going to ungroup this. I don't know why it got grouped. There we go. Ungroup. And then move this over here. And then select this, object expand, and now this is expanded, and this is the mask. And if I make a clipping mask, I could do that as well. Looks like it might just be the one object that's making the mask, just a single shape. So something to think about. But the masks are interesting because they will allow you to get some nice textures into these letters. So I'm just going to, again, release this and just make a clipping mask, and we'll have that. If you want, you can still add strokes on these elements, so you can kind of see I can still work with the shape itself. It's just that inside is the actual photograph. And by the way, if you double click, you can actually get into, and triple click, you can get back into that image and move it around, even though it is clipped, so that you can adjust it to make it look the way you want. So for instance, maybe you want to just tighten it up a little bit, and then when you click back out of that group, you'll see that that has changed now. And then let's go back to our layers palette. So this is another thing that you can do with some texture. Now to put texture in the entire poster, you can just go ahead and go File, Place. And in this case, we're going to bring in, let's see, this image. And we're just going to plop it in and obviously make it smaller. And I'm going to send this back to the back, arrange, send to back, and then obviously in my layers palette, I should be able to bring it forward one time. So arrange, bring forward. By the way, you could use this command and then right and left bracket, and you can use that, and you can see how this allows you to zoom, to bring things forward and backwards with the keyboard shortcuts here. So you can get it to be one forward, and what we're going to do now is we're going to use this image to just slightly texturize that background, that poster. Notice also that I'm going over this orange or this red edge. So what you can do is just go to this opacity, and you can play with the opacity just by blending it like this. And you'll see that it actually interacts with the underlying brown layer that you have. So that gives you a little bit of texture, as you can kind of see. So you can make that much less dense, something like that, right? Let's bring in, and then you could always, if you, again, don't want to deal with this, you can lock that layer. Because it's selected, I can just lock it under Object and lock right here, selection, right? Or you can go to the layers palette, which is always probably the best thing, because then you know exactly where it's located. We know that it's not on the not the back one, but the right in front. You can kind of see it right here, and then you could lock it if you wanted to. To see what you have, by the way, because it'll start getting sloppy with all the things that you see here, you can always go to the view and then look at the trim view. That's going to actually show you what the poster will look like after it's cut. So you'll know if the letters are too close to the edge or something like that. Okay, so this is one way of working with transparency. I'm going to go ahead and place another image. Let's see, we've got some more texture. Here's some texture, leaves, place, and then we're just going to place that and zoom out a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to again send this to the back. I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut, command bracket and right and left bracket to get us backwards, and you can see that it's like underneath the image here, and then it's on top of the image here. So the other images, so now it's all the way in the back, as you can kind of see here. And then if I bring it forward, it goes up one level, and then it goes up another level. And now it's at it's right here, as we can see that. We're going to go to the stroke palette, or the opacity palette. And this time, instead of making 100% opacity and modifying it this way, what we're going to do is we're going to try a blend mode. And a blend mode interacts with the layers below it. So just to see how this works, I'm going to unlock, just turn this off. I'm going to unlock this tree layer and just bring the opacity back up to what it was. So for instance, the opacity is going to go back to 100. So you can see just the tree. And then I'm going to turn on the leaf layer, and you'll notice how the blend mode is interacting with this tree layer. So you've got this leaf layer and then the tree layer, and both of them are set to 100%, but the difference is that the blend mode, like this is darken, this is color burn, and you can see how both of them now interact. So you don't have to just change the opacity. You could try different blend modes. Lighten will make everything lighter, so you can kind of see how that looks. And again, this is just to get some texture into the image itself. And then finally, the overlay areas here, soft light, will make things darker where they're darker and lighter where they're lighter. So play with soft light, hard light often is really interesting. And then just play with it until you see something you like. You're also able to, with these blend modes, adjust the opacity. So even though it's a hard light blend mode, you can still change the opacity like that until you get some interesting looking texture. Now, if you want to dial everything back, instead of adjusting the opacity for these individual like photographic elements, you can just use that rectangle and just bring that forward. I'm just going to take that rectangle and move it upward, and then just adjust the opacity for that as well. And then this will give you, let me see if I can select it. There we go. And you can see now you can have that texture be in the background but then the colored rectangle will adjust everything to make it kind of push back. And if you choose a different color, it'll act like a little bit of a film or something like that. If you really want this single color to act like a gel, what you'll use for the opacity is something called multiply. That makes everything look like a gel. So now this becomes like a colored gel on top of the photograph. So this is really nice to use because say if you work with a word or a letter like S here, and then modify it, move it here. So both of these are there. Just going to lock this layer and zoom in so you can kind of see it. And we're going to take these and make them white. So, and then if you wanted to change the color or nature of something of these, like you could add something on top, like this rectangular element here, make it orange or red or something. And then if that opacity blend mode was set to multiply, you'll see it acts like a red gel all across the entire element. So playing with the opacities of things to make them more or less powerful, playing with the idea of different blend modes, and then working with clipping masks to create like really interesting textures and shapes. Hopefully that helps a little bit. When you're doing the layout, think about like how you're going to frame everything, and then hopefully this will give you some some nice tools to start composing something interesting. Okay, before we're done, assume that your poster was somewhat finished. Again, you can use anything you want as far as shapes are concerned. Go back to normal here and send this back to 100. So break up the space using elements of black and white large shapes, just so we have something interesting, and try to balance everything as well. Once you have a poster set up the way you kind of want, what you're going to do is go to File, Save As, and you're going to change this to Adobe PDF, call it Poster. And this is very important. What you're going to want to do here is make sure your marks and bleeds, you've got a trim mark so they know where to cut. I'll show you what that looks like. Also, this might not be checked by default. Please use the document bleed settings because you put them in, so this is what it's going to use. Otherwise, you'd have to put this in by hand. And for the preset, go ahead and use a press quality. That's going to make sure everything is set up correctly. And again, press quality first, then go here, trim marks, use document bleed settings under marks and bleeds here. And you'll see that the compression's set to 300 pixels per inch, and you've got everything else ready for print. So again, press quality means the printing press. And just don't forget to make sure these two are checked. Go ahead and save the PDF. When you do that, I'm going to show you what this looks like. It should be right here. And you can kind of see that you got the poster, but you also have these little trim marks right here. Let's go ahead and open that. I'll open it with just preview. So make sure that those trim marks exist. So when the people cut the poster, they will cut it here, and all of this will be gone. So when you're working, be careful not to get anywhere near that line with the important textual information. But you can kind of see how this poster at this point has turned out. It's the right format and the right size. And just so you know, it's actually not 11 by 17. It is actually 11.92 by 17.92, and that's because of the additional bleed, which is quarter inch or quarter inch here and a quarter inch here. But you also have the white area that allows people to see the trim mark. So this poster is just slightly under 12 by 18, which is what it will be printed on, a 12 by 18 sheet. Okay, so hopefully this helps a little bit. I would love to see you play with some imagery and text. Just have fun working with the layout and composition for this project. Okay.